Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan, and today I wanted to take a look at the new giant-sized Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures from Playmates Toys. Now, it is no secret that Playmates Toys has been going kind of bonkers with reissues of the vintage Ninja Turtles action figures. We've had so many of them building up to the Mutant Mayhem stuff for the upcoming movie. So lots of reissued action figures, but I think one of the more interesting were the reissues of the Giants, the large-scale Ninja Turtles action figures. The Giants were always pretty popular, both in the original line when they came out and with collectors nowadays. It's just one of those really cool things about the vintage line is that we got these giant-sized Ninja Turtles action figures. So Playmates reissuing those, well, that raised some eyebrows. It got some people excited, including me. The guy who's always wondering why we're getting so many reissues was right there to fork out some money for these brand new Giants, just like many of you. So these have been out for a while. These are not new at all. You probably already have these by now, but I still wanted to talk about them even though I've had them for probably a little over a month now after finding them out in the wild. So let's do it. Let's just jump in and talk about these. So first things first, I want to talk about the packaging. Unlike the vintage figures, which came in large window boxes that were blue, they were unique to the Giants line, these come in open air boxes so that you can actually touch the figure, and the boxes are themed like the vintage card backs. This is pretty cool, actually. I really like seeing that brick motif. I like seeing the artwork that pays homage to the vintage artwork on those old card backs there, but it definitely stands out. Also, when you flip around to the backside, you've got that little story of the origin of the Turtles, which comes right off of the vintage card backs. And we've got a cross-sell showing all four Turtles in this Giants line. There's one thing about this packaging that I really don't like, and it's this little burst on here that says Original 1989 Figures. It just feels misleading to me, and we're going to talk about that as we're going through this video because there's no way I can talk about these without comparing them to the actual 1989 Ninja Turtles Giants. Calling them the original 89 Giants is just a false statement. It would be more accurate if they said inspired by the 89 figures or based on the 89 figures or something to that effect, but outright calling these the 89 figures is just not an accurate thing. And I understand what they're doing. They're trying to let everybody know, hey, remember those giant turtles you had as a kid? These are kind of like those. But that's the thing. They're kind of like those. They are not the same at all. And that's where we're going to get into it now. So, when you get these guys pulled out of those boxes, I got to tell you, they're really nice figures. They feel solid. They are sturdy. They actually do remind me of the way that the vintage ones felt. And the articulation is really good on these guys. It's just basic stuff with the heads going left and right, the arms moving up and down at the shoulders. You can turn the wrists. You got that cut at the legs, and you can swivel at the bottom of the knee there. But they feel sturdy. They stand up good. They are solid, chunky toys. Definitely great if your kids today want to get these and bash them around just like we did when we were kids. And honestly, they display nicely. So they are really well-made toys. I did have a few instances where the paint wasn't perfect, but for the most part, I do think that they are pretty good. Speaking of the paint, one thing I want to point out, all of them have the top of the bandana left unpainted. You'll notice if you look at the figures from the top down, there's the ridge where the bandana is, and the paint just stops. It is only on the front of the bandana. So when you're looking at them top down, they do look a little weird. When you're looking at them straight on, you don't even notice it. But it is weird to me that they just put that line of paint straight across the front and left the tops unpainted there. But for the most part, I do like these guys quite a bit. Now, the colors of them really follow suit with what we've been seeing with a lot of the reissues in the vintage style smaller action figures. For example, Raphael's skin tone is that weird pea color green that we've seen on all of the reissues. It definitely stands out from the vintage figure. Same with Donatello, who has this very dark brown skin, and while he did always have a brownish green color in the vintage line, it definitely wasn't this dark like it is on these newer releases. Each of the figures do come packaged with their signature weapon. Leonardo has his katana, Michelangelo has his nunchucks, Donatello his bow staff, and Raphael has two sais. And that's one thing that I definitely want to talk about with these, because I did see some folks online complaining that Playmates was cheap and didn't include two katanas with Leonardo. I do think it's important to point out that in the vintage 89 Giants line, Leonardo only came with one katana there as well. Raphael was the only one that came with two weapons, the two sais. So I guess the argument could be made, well, Playmates still could have given us two katanas with this new one, and you're right. I just have a feeling that they were referencing the pack out from the vintage line as an excuse not to give us two katanas with this figure, but it is vintage accurate. So speaking of those weapons, I think that's an important thing to compare to the vintage figures. Now, I don't have all of the vintage weapons, but I have a few of them, and I definitely want to show them side by side with those. For example, Leonardo's katana. If we look at the new katana next to the vintage katana, you'll see that the new one actually has a longer handle. However, it's thinner. The older handle was fatter. And the blade on the old one was very gummy and flexible, while the new one is actually pretty rigid. So you can definitely tell the difference between the vintage one and the new one. In fact, if you wanted to put the new sword in the vintage figure's hand, he doesn't get a tight grip on it. It sits there, but it's very loose fitting. And I do think it's a good thing that the weapons are different, because the vintage ones are often missing their weapons. We definitely don't want the new weapons to get put in with the old ones and then sold as vintage. That's always one of those things that you have to kind of worry about. But if you just want to display these new ones with your vintage ones, that might work okay. Michelangelo's nunchucks is another one that I can show you side by side. They are completely different. On the new ones, he's got a sculpted chain, while on the vintage one, there was a rope between the pieces. And once again, the handles of the nunchucks are much thinner on the new ones. So the weapons do stand out. And one of the other things that is quite a bit different on these new figures are the belts, because the belts now are made of a plastic material, where the belts on the vintage ones were actually a soft goods. They were like a faux leather. Some of the earliest ones had stitched letters, while the majority of them had printed letters, but the belts themselves were a soft goods material. As a result, they are oftentimes missing when you find vintage ones now, or they're really tattered and worn out. So actually, the plastic belts on the new ones that are non-removable is a pretty good call, because they look good. You don't have to worry about them falling off or breaking or getting lost. But again, it's another way that these stand out alongside the vintage ones. So let's go ahead and do a comparison time. I can stand three of these guys alongside their vintage counterparts. I don't have a Raphael, which is kind of funny because as a kid, I only had the giant Raphael. And now as an adult, he's the only one I don't have. Weird how that works sometimes. But here we go with the brand new Donatello standing alongside the vintage 89 Donatello. This is another place where you can see a key difference. The new ones are smaller. The vintage ones stood 13 inches tall, while the new ones are around 12 inches. So the old ones are almost a full inch taller than the new ones, but they're also a lot bulkier than the new ones. So the new ones are definitely scaled down just a little bit. And let's go ahead and stand Mikey alongside the vintage Mikey, and we can start talking about this as well. Another big standout, the head sculpts are completely different on the new ones. In fact, the heads on the new ones are all identical. They all have the same head. While on the vintage ones, they had unique head sculpts with different shapes with their mouths. So the new ones, all sharing the same head. Let's go ahead and look at that vintage Leo alongside the new Leo there, just so you can see what these guys look like side by side. And I did think it would be a lot of fun to show these new figures alongside some of the other vintage giants, because the scales did change a little bit in the old line as well. So we can go ahead and put the new Donnie alongside the movie star giant Donnie from the vintage line. Those were a little bit smaller than the others. However, you can see he's still bigger than the new Donatello. And hey, how about Slam Duncan Donatello? Yeah, there was a giant of him. Yeah, he's actually one of the hardest figures to get from the vintage line. So I guess I'm flexing a little bit here. And how about we go ahead and stand him alongside Giant Bebop and Giant Rocksteady, just because I do love the Giant so much, and I wanted to show these new ones alongside those vintage Giant villains. And that's really it. I mean, I really just wanted to talk about the differences with the new ones compared to the vintage ones. I think with stuff like this, when reissues come out, there's always concern that people are going to try to pass the new ones off as the vintage ones, especially when it comes to weapons and stuff. But the good news is that these new ones are so different from the vintage ones that as long as you educate yourself, there's no way that you can accidentally fall for one of these new ones as a vintage one. I also think it's really interesting to see just how different these are from the vintage ones. So if you didn't realize that, and you skipped these because you already had the vintage ones or whatever, maybe now you need these because they are different. And honestly, they're not as cool as the old ones, in the sense that the old ones had like unique head sculpts and stuff like that. But these are still nice figures. They're solid, they're durable, they're really well made, and the price point on these being $30 a figure, really not that bad by today's standards. So, I don't know, I do kind of like them. I'm glad that I picked them up. I wasn't sure about them at first, but getting them home and really comparing them with the others, I don't know, it's actually kind of cool. I do like these. So, what about you guys? What do you think of the brand new TMNT Giants released by Playmates Toys? Like I said, these have been floating around for months now. They seem very easy to get at both Walmart and Target, and they've even been on Amazon. So if you're looking for them, they shouldn't be too hard to track down. Thank you guys so very much for watching this video, and until next time, my friends.